Soundsystem by xSpoiler goes back to an earlier era, bringing back a style from earlier 2.1 and mixing it up with 2.2 camera controls and effects. The level tries to represent the song's energy through its colors and effects, with the later parts of the drop containing more effects and movements as the song gets more upbeat. The level starts off with what could be described as a weak first impression, with an extremely bright color palette for a part of the song that's not terribly energetic. This is the down part of the level, and while that's represented in the dynamics of the part, it's not well represented in its colors. Some interesting block designs are presented, but aren't quite polished enough for me to say this is rate-worthy. Between the overly bright glow placed around the blocks and the jarring connector pieces used in the design, the blocks come off as overly simple without any texturing or layered details, which are important to have in glow design levels. The saws connect to the ground with this cool curvy structure, and that works quite well. Sadly, the saws are virtually default and don't bring any interesting design. The biggest flaw of this part is that the background feels more static than the blocks. The glow stars and the pinwheel compose the background, yet the glow stars don't move at all. Most of the default GD background is visible with how bright the background color is. The part as a whole does not match the energy I expect with the buffer part. The piano in this song had more than enough of a melody to work with some effects too, although none of that seemed to be attempted in this part. It seemed like Spoiler didn't really know where to draw the line between the background and the foreground in this part. Moving on to the spider part, this part switches the color scheme to a deep blue with more desaturated tones in the block design, and uses a sharp camera tilt towards the right for the entirety of the section. Halfway through, the game mode shifts to a robot and a vignette effect is used on screen. While this part suffers from a lot of the same issues as the first, the blocks are much more defined from the background in this part by using desaturated colors and having a darker background. I would have liked to see some more experimentation with ground spike designs, as having the saws be the same color as the ground spikes make it feel a little too plain sitting across the entire part. As for the block design itself, box meta is not a bad strategy, but it comes off as a little unoriginal. I find the vignette effect to be a nice touch and help with blending the colors of the part together, though the camera rotation comes off as jarring as it remains static throughout the entire part, which still isn't the down part of the song. It would have been better if this had been a slight rotation back and forth, or even a zoom would have been more fitting. The pre-drop expands on the block design established in the previous part, and does it fairly well. The movements here are better and smoother, and there's more contrast between the background and the foreground colors, which I appreciate. These little particles that come up add a nice touch to everything as well. The main gimmick of this part is this grayscale shader that's supposed to line up with the song that kind of works, but also doesn't. The song is crossfading from nothing in this part. So I feel as if this effect would have been more fitting if the grayscale slowly faded away and the colors appeared as the song got more energetic. Though this is my favorite part of the level so far, it still has its weaknesses. The ground spikes have these individual bars at different heights, which would have been perfect for some subtle sinusoidal movement up and down, but this wasn't done, making the ground spikes feel overly static in a part full of block movements. The drop comes in full force, and we finally get some color variation. The blocks and the ground spikes have plenty of contrast, which look quite nice. The energy is just boosted when the drop hits and makes sense and works well. The pulse between the light and dark colors helps to add the intensity as well as the wind effect, which makes the drop one of the best parts of this level. The drop also has the most intense movements, using a bounce easing, which helps to give extra energy to the blocks. I also appreciate that an appropriate amount of air deco was used, which helps the drop to not look empty, but also not messy. I will say that the spider orb here can be a little annoying, as it appears to be sized just big enough that buffer clicking it will always make you die at the spike below. Though that's not to say the drop also doesn't have its flaws decoration-wise. The emptiest part of the drop is sadly in the ground spikes, which take up such a large part of the screen that it makes the part look a little awkward. The single color saws cutting into the two color ground spikes makes the black outline of the ground spikes disconnect for a little while, which looks kind of weird. The blocks, however, are nicely broken up into two different designs, and as a whole work well, though a bit more color contrast in the blocks themselves would have worked better for me. The level as a whole feels like it draws a lot from the mid 2.1 and late 1.9 eras, as it's reminiscent of parts from old Glow collabs like Pinball Panic or Alt F4 by Hyperfire creators, or Deception Dive even. This level by a creator who shall not be named, which the style is decently reminiscent of, if these levels were a little more unpolished than they are. In general, Soundsystem is a suitable comeback level for someone who hasn't played the game in a long time, but it does come off as quite novice between its weak usage of colors and effects in the beginning to the unpolished ground spikes in the drop. Overall, I'm thinking a 5 out of 10 rating for this level, and I'm considering this level to be a star rate at best. The gameplay is decently fun to play, but has some quirks at times that make it annoying, which I somehow seem to find all of them when recording the level. All that considered, here's a full playthrough of the level, no commentary or anything. So you can decide for yourself what you'd rate this level.